So I do farm on a small scale. I teach at Indiana University in Bloomington. I am the textiles program there. I've sort of evolved my work with Indigo around a community project, and that kind of gets at one of the things that I'm really interested in the world of critical art theory. There's this. It's always a French guy, right? Came up with this term called relational aesthetics, and it's actually it's very interesting and sort of beautiful idea about how we work, how we relate to each other, and the aesthetics of that, and how that can be incorporated into an art practice. And if I have a sort of a key word for what I'm doing, what you're doing, and then what we're doing here today. It really is about togetherness and working together. You can do, in Japan there's a great expression that is ninin sankyaku. It basically means that two people do the work of three. And the working together, if each of us were doing this individually, it'd be an overwhelming amount of labor, time, energy, but by working together and sharing that amongst ourselves, first of all, there's a real joy in being together, working together, meeting people, and sort of interweaving your lives through these things. And then it also, it does make for lighter work. And I'm going to talk about this more tonight, but I also am very interested in the notion of intention. And I think it's something that John talked about, Rebecca talked about, but the idea of, in making something, that we I guess I'm in California, so I can say these things and not be considered strange. But listening to everyone talk, I'm like, okay, it's beautiful. I feel like I'm not in Indiana, but as everyone was talking this morning, I'm like, wow, I'm in California. Don't take that the wrong way. But really, as you work, you put your heart and your energy into something, and that thing that you're making, in a way, it contains that. It's very different from say going out and getting synthetic. To use the example of indigo, sure, we can go get synthetic indigo. It's a petroleum product, and it's cheap, but it doesn't have any of us in it. It doesn't have any of you in it. It's really sort of, to me, it's meaningless. I was never really, I became interested in textiles living in Japan through people in my community who were going out and collecting plants and gathering them. And to me, it was never really about the color per se, but all the other things that went into making that color, and how that color is, in and of itself, it's a material. It's a plant that has a history, that's grown in a place that might have a greater societal or environmental benefit. But it's not just some color. I was never interested. I have to, in the courses I teach, I'm now required to teach about synthetic dyes. I'm totally uninterested, and I can't. I find it very difficult to inspire students when it's something that to me, because it's just a color. That's it. It doesn't have. It's not a material, and so I'm really interested in the plants that we're working with and the dyes, the color that we create as sort of a more holistic material that has a history and has other benefits and implications. And as we go, I'll probably end up, we'll end up, it's sort of a really fantastic group. I think we all have a lot to learn from each other, and I'm excited to sort of be sharing ideas as we work. But really, to give you a quick, bigger picture of today, the hope is at the end of the day, we're going to have this filled, and we're going to start the clay surface on it. Okay. And what we're doing here is the purpose. Is everyone going tonight? Is everyone going to be able to go to the talk tonight? Is there anyone who's not going? You're not going. Okay. So I'm going to cover some of the same material, but one of the things about this process, tonight I'm gonna show you other ways that indigo is processed in other parts of the world. If everyone like wants to stand.
I know.
One of the really awesome things about this process is when you look at indigo throughout the world, there's a much more simpler and direct way of processing indigo. It's much simpler. But the reality is, the places that method developed were tropical. And we don't live in the tropics. That's our reality. We live in temperate regions, and this method is so perfect for a temperate region. It fits the environment. So what we're doing is those of you who have been harvesting the indigo and stuff know, you're harvesting it, you're drying leaves, and then you take those dry leaves and we're going to compost them down. And they'll be composted for about 100 days, and what that does is it simply burns off, it's a hot composting process, it burns off excess plant material and concentrates the dye, so that you can dye with the regular, like the leaves of the plant, you can dye with them fresh, you can dye with them dried, but you'll only get pale colors. So in order to get those really, really deep blues and blacks that you can get from indigo, you need the dye to be more concentrated. Yes. And that's the main purpose of this. But the composting serves a second function, which is really its most important function in a temperate climate, and that is that it contains all the bacteria necessary to make, very easily, in a temperate region, make a natural fermentation vat. Okay? So one of the things that drives me crazy is all the natural labeling, sort of the greenwash of the word natural. And you hear people saying, oh, it's natural indigo. A more correct term would be plant source indigo. Because essentially if you're taking indigo from a plant and then mixing it with a whole bunch of synthetic chemicals, is that really a natural process? That you then end up with a vat that you can't, you've got a vat that might have lye in it, sodium hydrosulfide, or thiourea dioxide, things that you're not going to put back on the earth. So you're sort of, well, you get where I'm going with that. This method that you have, once you have the composted indigo, makes it very easy to make a natural vat using wood ash, the composted indigo, and natural fermentation. At the end of that vat's lifespan, you can take it and spread it back on the field. It's basically composted plant material, wood ash, some limestone, and some wheat bran. So there's nothing in there that you wouldn't normally put on your fields anyway. So it's especially where we live in the Midwest, where we have acid rain problems and we have to neutralize the soil. Adding the alkalinity from the vat to the soil is not a big deal. So in a way, it's not an entirely sort of zero emissions process, but at the end, really, you're just extracting the color, and then the waste materials can go back on to the field. So the fact that this vat enables us to do this very easily in a temperate region is really one of the main reasons that I choose to work with this method. It's the same method that was developed in Europe with woad. I don't know my directions here. Which way is east and west? This is east, so I guess I should say kind of this way. Europe that way, Asia and Japan that way, and it developed independently, but it's the method that was developed in a temperate region for doing this process. And because of a number of historical factors, it died out in Europe, but continued on in Japan. So because of the way it continued there, we still have knowledge of how this is done, and are able to continue doing it today. So what we're going to do is this floor that we're going to be making is a floor especially for composting indigo. John has very graciously dug this out and backfilled it with various sized aggregate up to what you see on the surface. And we're going to put in sand, rice hulls, a little more sand to hold those down, and then clay on top of that. And the main purpose of this floor is to be absorbent. As you compost the indigo, you basically mix it with water, and the water trickles down, and if you do this on like a cement floor or something like that, the water will pool there, the indigo leaves at the bottom that should be composting are just going to rot away. So the main purpose of this floor is to be absorbent. And as we work, the hope today, first of all, this is, someone was asking me earlier how many of these I've built. When I was an apprentice, we resurfaced 3 of these floors in buildings that had the overall surface area of the floor we were replacing were probably 3 times of the whole shed here, each one of the buildings. And then I built one on my own from scratch when I lived in Japan, and I'm building another one right now in Indiana. I'm basically at that point. I have pictures of where we are right now. So it's really exciting to be doing this and to be sharing this with everyone. I'm not really an expert in doing this, in as much as no one's really an expert in doing this, not even in Japan. There's no one whose specific job this is. This is something that the farmers the 5 or 6 people who still actually grow and process indigo there do on their own as need be. You know, people build one of these things, and we were using one of the ones on the farm I worked at was 300 years old. So the floor had been resurfaced every so often, but it hadn't been like dug out and backfilled and whatnot. It was done 300 years ago. So it's not a super common thing that people are doing. And the other thing that we're dealing with here is that the materials are very, very different from the way we access materials in our system here, which is very industrialized, is very different from the way you can access I had to materials in Japan. So there it was very easy. There's big, tile factories, kilns, but they do all their own mixing of clay, and you can just drive a truck and they'll load you up with mixed clay. Here it's not as highly processed or sifted as the clay that we're going to be using. So this is going to be a bit of a learning experience for me as well. We're going to have to be creative and flexible as we go, especially when we get up to the clay layer on top. But the first thing we're going to do is put in a layer of sand and kind of get that leveled. We're going to put in, did you do exact calculations, or is